Hi, and in today's podcast, Scott Forbes and myself review a bumper set of films. We have Air, Operation Fortune Ruse de Guerre, the Mario Brothers movie, The Pope's Exorcist, Cairo Conspiracy, Kill Boksoon, God's Creatures, Chupa, Murder Mystery 2, and On a Wing and a Prayer. This is Flickering Dreams. Let's pitch straight into it. We've got a whole bumper set of films again to talk about, and we're going to start with Air, which came out week before last. I think it's been out 2 weeks now. And Air is based on a true story of a guy called Sonny Vaccaro, played by Matt Damon, and he's a spotter for the Nike baseball division. And he's a long-term employee and friend of the founder, CEO, Phil Knight, who's played by the director of this, who's Ben Affleck. And he's under pressure to perform since his division is losing a lot of market share to their competitors. And his marketing colleagues, Rob Strasser, played by Jason Bateman with a ridiculously big haircut, and Howard White, played by Chris Tucker, are both fearful for their jobs. And Sonny comes up with an outlandish sort of do or die plan, but can he deliver on the goods? The goods in this case being the sports contract with one Michael Jordan. And in this short clip, Sonny is pitching his big plan to Rob Strasser.
There's nothing cool about Nike.
You would have to have a pretty compelling pitch.
I can tell him the one thing the other companies can't compete with. Our basketball division is terrible.
I do not love it.
Okay, so that's a little bit of Air, which seems to be doing fairly good business in the cinemas. Scott, what did you make of it? You only just saw it last couple of days, I think.
Yeah, that's right. So last time we were talking to each other, you and also Andy had already seen the film, and you guys were raving about it, telling me how great it is. It's one of the films of the year. You were talking about putting bets on for the Oscars. Yeah. So needless to say, you hyped up a lot and upped expectations, possibly a little too much for me, I would say. I was looking forward to this film, and I did enjoy it. I thought Matt Damon was really good in the lead role. He's been doing a lot of good dramatic roles recently. And as expected, Viola Davis killed it. And I am with you that there's a chance she could get a supporting actress nomination. Don't know about when, but there's a shot at a nom there. I thought the dialogue was really well written. This is very much a film where most of the scenes are people in rooms talking to each other, people on the phone talking about business deals to each other, and the majority of the film is made up with that, which can be a positive and a negative. I think from the positive side, it allowed for some really good writing and really good back and forth between a lot of the different characters. From the more negative side, it could be considered by some to be a little bit boring. I've seen a little bit about that on the internet as well, and even myself, sometimes I felt like, okay, let's get on with it. Let's get a little bit more dramatic about this. I think the main issue for me was the film builds up like it's creating tension in terms of who Michael Jordan will eventually sign for. We're obviously following the guys at Nike, but we're told that the company that he really wants to join is Adidas. And basically Nike are trying to get in there and almost steal him from where he wants to be. Now, in a lesser known story, perhaps there would have been a little bit more jeopardy and you would have been like, oh, I wonder who he's going to sign for. I found it really difficult when it was very obvious that we know the story and the film wouldn't even exist if he did sign for somebody else. So there was part of me thinking, this is a little bit underwhelming in that it's not as dramatic as it wants to be because of prior knowledge.
Yeah. I mean, it's a film about the journey, isn't it, rather than the destination? And
yeah, to some extent.
Yeah. I think it's always the case. Yeah.
But you absolutely loved it, so
I loved it. I mean, I am of a certain age that I well remember the 80s, and there was a massive blast of nostalgia in this film, from the big hair to the Rubik's cubes and the enormous great mobile phones that I still remember. I used to have one of the first IBM laptops when I worked for IBM, and it was this enormous great like sewing machine suitcase thing that hung off your shoulder. I've got a bad shoulder and a bad hip to this day, I think, because I lugged this bloody laptop around the world with me. So it was an interesting time, and I thought the film really beautifully reflected the nostalgia of the time. I agree that I think Matt Damon gave a great performance, and the supporting roles, Jason Bateman was really good. He seems to be good in just about everything he does. And Chris Tucker, this is his third film in 16 years since the Rush Hour films finished, and he's basically done very, very little at all. But it was great to see him in a role, and he's a larger than life character. I thought he was really good. And Chris Messina as well, playing the sort of Jay Maguire character. Show me the money. Show me the money! In a rant, which seems to be the only thing that earned it a 15 certificate, I think, is that complete rant by Chris Messina. Looking at the film, I've seen far worse 12 certificate films, and if they maybe toned down that rant a little, it would have made a lesser film, but it would have maybe got a 12 certificate for the film. But I thought that was very funny as well. The only thing I really wasn't sold on in the film was Ben Affleck's acting performance, who he didn't come across as convincing at all as this CEO guy. He seemed to be acting, and maybe that's a downside of being the director of a film as well as the lead actor, that you perhaps can't be directed to say, no, we need you to do that again, Ben. Don't know. That was one of the only things that I really didn't like about the film. There was a little too much emphasis as well, I thought, on subtitles explaining what was going on. It became a little bit blah 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 with the subtitles, which went against some of my earlier positives about the film, that it did a lot of showing rather than telling. For example, it showed Sonny's gambling, that kind of implied he was a bit of a risk taker at the beginning, which I thought was really nice, that he was somebody who would put it out there and take a risk without having to be told that. And also the lovely point at which the whole division was in jeopardy, and the camera from Sonny's kind of viewpoint swept around the office, picking out the kids' drawings on the walls, and all of the reasons why there would be a enormous lot of difficulty and stress if he didn't actually pull this off. I thought some of those touches were really nice from Affleck as a director as well. I mean, I gave it 10 out of 10. Maybe if I went to see it again, I might back off that a point to a 9 out of 10. But I still thought it was a really good film. Yeah.
No, I think that's fair. And I think the emotional side you mentioned as well, there was a good moment with Matt Damon and Jason Bateman's character, where Jason Bateman's talking about his son and the relationship going on there, and what's at stake if this decision doesn't go the way they want it to. That was really nice. That was a nice scene.
Yeah, that was good. Okay, so I'm probably a 9 or a 10. Let's say 9.5. How about you, Scott?
I think I'm more in the 7 camp.
7. Okay, all right, it's fine. I think we might flip on the next film here.
Well, indeed.
which is Operation Fortune Ruse de Guerre, which is one of the most unmemorable titles you're likely to come across. And this is on. Is this Netflix or Amazon?
This is Amazon.
Amazon Prime, yeah. So in Operation Fortune, this is named after the absurdly named Orson Fortune, who's played by Jason Statham. You imagine Mr. and Mrs. Fortune saying, "Oh, we've had a son. What should we call him? Let's call him Orson." Yeah, that's likely to happen, right? But Orson Fortune is a kind of a special ops contractor with a very costly line in expense claims. And he's recruited by a government bod, a UK government bod called Knighton, played by the wonderful Eddie Marsan, who is always one of my favourite actors, just quietly working away in the background in a lot of films. And he's being recruited to recover something stolen. A MacGuffin. Yes, a MacGuffin. They don't actually know what the MacGuffin is. which seems a bit ludicrous and makes MI6 look like a complete bunch of chances to me. But there we go. Okay. They don't know what it is, but they know it is being sold for billions of dollars on the shady black market by a dealer called Greg, played by Hugh Grant. But there was also a rival team led by Fortune's arch rival, a guy called Mike, played by Pete Fernandando, and he's also in play. Now, in this clip, Fortune is using blackmail to gain the help of film star Danny Francesco, played by Josh Hartnett.
The world needs you for your greatest role yet. Who are you? I'm your new manager. There's a sensitive and awkward situation between you and your sister-in-law.
I actually love my sister-in-law.
It's Danny. You made that quite evident.
So that is Josh Hartnett, who has been a little bit in the wilderness as an actor. He's billed here as Hollywood's top actor, which is kind of ironic when you look at his recent IMDb history. I mean, it's Jason Statham. It's a Guy Ritchie film. You kind of know what you're going to get with this film, and I think you get it. I thought it was very predictable and quite formulaic as a sort of a Bond light type of adventure. There were some positives. I thought Hugh Grant again was great value as the sort of Cockney arms dealer bloke. I think it's very similar to the role he played in Guy Ritchie's The Gentleman, isn't it? Which is a film I still haven't yet to see, actually. Did you see The Gentleman?
I did see The Gentleman, and yeah, you're right. There is a strong similarity between those characters.
It's similar, yeah. But this seems to be the slot that Hugh Grant is kind of fitting into at the moment as the kind of dodgy villain, sometimes with a Cockney accent, sometimes like in Dungeons and Dragons without. And he does it very well. And particularly if it's a humorous sort of film like this, I think he fits into it very, very well and does it great. I think my main problem with it was with the script, which seems to be all over the place. They kept jumping from place to place around the world with a title cap saying Doha or saying I don't know, Bognor Regis. I can't even remember the places they go to in this film. But it's almost like what are they doing here? Right? Where are they now? They were here a little while ago doing something, and now they're here and they're doing something. They're shooting people. I cannot deny that they're not shooting people or beating them up. But why? What are they doing? I got lost. There didn't seem to be any logical explanation to where the movie went and why. And there were some really strange aspects, I thought, to the script. Like the first time you see Jason Statham in his character, I think it's in Morocco. Yeah, I think it was in Morocco. He F's and blinds every other word. Oh, what are you effing doing here? Yeah, effing here in effing Morocco when I'm effing on holiday. Yeah, effing this, effing that, effing that. Rest of the film, he hardly swears at all. It's almost as if the writers introducing the character we've written this introductory scene is going to be one of Jason Statham's characteristics, that he uses the F word in every other word. And then they forgot about it all, right? I found it bizarre. Anyway, I think you like this a lot better than I did, Scott.
Yeah, so I mean, listening to you rant there, you do make some good points. So I've got to give you that. And I'd be lying if I said that this is a top quality movie. But I just had so much fun watching this. I was just saying it's got that sort of Mission Impossible meets The Night Manager sort of vibe to it.
Yeah.
Where you've got the mix of like action, comedy with that spy thriller going on as well. And I just really enjoyed the way that they didn't take anything seriously. I thought Jason Statham and the partnership that he had with Aubrey Plaza in this film was just really funny. There's some of the subtle humor that they were just doing straight-faced, that particularly Plaza, who's really good at that type of humor, that was making me laugh out loud in my sofa. Yeah, I know that it's not technically a great film, but
what you're saying
someone...
is this is a guilty pleasure, Scott, isn't it?
There's no such thing, Bob, as a guilty pleasure. If you like something, don't be guilty.
I always
Don't
get
feel
told
guilty
not to
about it.
say that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Might as well start
absolutely.
here. Yeah.
Yeah, so this, I will say that some of the editing was a little bit all over the place, as you were mentioning, and in some of the action scenes, there's a little bit too much quick cut between them. I'd have liked to see some of the scenes play out a little bit more, just in maybe long shot. I loved the cinematography in this film. I thought there were some beautiful moments, and it helps when they're going all around the world to great locations.
Yeah, it was very
allows
glossy.
for some beautiful
Very
scenes.
glossy, yeah.
And go along with the sound and score as well. The opening scene, we see Cary Elwes' character walking in, and you've got his footsteps going down the sort of marble floor, and then you just hear a beat coming along with it, and it turns the footsteps into music. And right from that opening shot, I was like, okay, here we go. I'm liking where this is going. That's quite clever. So my favorite Guy Ritchie film is The Man from U.N.C.L.E., which is a hugely underrated movie, in my opinion. Deserved sequels, but it looks like that's never going to happen for that. I know most people like to talk about Snatch and Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels, a lot of the more grittier Cockney gangster films that Guy Ritchie's done. But I think probably because I found Operation Fortune quite similar in terms of story-wise to The Man from U.N.C.L.E., that's probably why I really enjoyed it more than arguably I should have. I just had fun. I sat down, I enjoyed it. There was lots of guns, lots of explosions, the comedy, the action. It just sort of worked for me, and I watched it and went, that was a bit silly, but it was enjoyable.
That's absolutely fine. Yeah. I mean, I rather grumpily, I think, gave it a 5 out of 10. You could push me to a 6. It was watchable. I actually enjoyed it more than John Wick, just because at least the action scenes were vaguely more sensible. Only a little, but only vaguely more sensible. But yeah, you could push me to a 6 out of 10.
Fair enough. I went with an 8, probably on the lower end of the 8, but
yeah,
it's sitting in that bracket for now.
All right. So yeah, if you want to park your brain at the door, watch a good action film with some humour, I think it's good. Wouldn't be the same without Hugh Grant, I have to say. I think Hugh Grant again absolutely made that film much more watchable. So there you go. Right, let's move on. The Mario Brothers movie, which I've seen, I don't think you've seen yet, Scott.
No, not yet.
So in this film, Mario, who's voiced by Chris Pratt, and Luigi, voiced by Charlie Day, are struggling plumbers in a large American-Italian family living in New York. And while they're trying to save Brooklyn from a terrible flood, they get sucked into a parallel universe where the terrible Bowser, played in over-the-top style by Jack Black, is trying to conquer the neighboring kingdoms and win the hand in marriage against her will of Princess Peach, played by Anya Taylor-Joy. Here's a clip.
Bowser is coming. Together, we are going to stop that monster.
How? Look at us. We're adorable.
So, I'm not the target audience for this film, I have to say. It's very bright, it's very brash. It felt like being put in a tumble dryer full of sherbet for 90 minutes. And it seeps into your brain, the colours and the noise and the action. It's not necessarily a bad thing. But to me, Mario Brothers movie felt overly corporate and a little bit charmless. I've seen that word charmless used in a lot of the reviews from the mainstream critics, which seem to have been universally terrible. By the way, I'm actually on BBC Radio Solent tomorrow morning at 7:20 talking about how this is such a hit, yet all the critics absolutely hated it. And it felt really clunky and episodic to me. And I noted on IMDb that there's 4 different directors credited for this film. And it almost felt as if they'd been given a chunk of this film each to direct. You go away, you make Mario's bit of the story, you go make Luigi's bit of the story, and then we'll bolt it together afterwards. And it felt a little bit like that, cutting from piece to piece. It didn't feel very smooth to me. The animation, I mean, it's okay, but it didn't feel like anything special to me compared with some of the cleverer kind of techniques and so on that we saw, for example, in Puss in Boots recently, which I thought had some very clever moments. But it was fine. I mean, all this is pretty meaningless when you look at what the film has done. This film came out last Friday, and in its opening weekend, it made $378 million globally. And that puts it at the very top of the table of animated openings worldwide, ever, right? This film has smashed the record books. So what I say about this film is pretty irrelevant. I gave it a 6 out of 10, just for the reasons I said. It's not an absolute disaster. It's 90 minutes, 92 minutes, in fact, of your life that you won't get back, but it didn't feel like you were just clinging onto the armrests in the cinema, begging for it to end. It was fine. It went along. My grandkids, on the other hand, who went to see it, both universally declared, we love it, and gave it 10 out of 10, both of them. Here's a quick clip of them talking about it.
Absolutely loved it. I quite liked it. It was quite scary for me, but I was fine.
What were the scary bits?
There was like skeletons coming out of the ground.
So would you recommend it? How many stars out of 5?
5 stars.
5.
5 out of 5.
Yeah, 5 out of 5.
Excellent. Good review. Thank you, guys.
Oh, that's cute.
Yeah. So that's Mario Brothers movie. It's wildly popular out there. It will probably stay in the cinemas for weeks and weeks on end. But yeah, it was okay. Moving on to something completely different. The Pope's Exorcist, which is hard enough to say. That's not me talking in tongues or anything. It's just difficult to say. The Pope's Exorcist, right? This came out last Friday. And in The Pope's Exorcist, it stars Russell Crowe, which was quite a surprise to find him in this film, I think. He stars as a real-life character called Father Gabriel Amorth, sadly no longer with us. But he is effectively the right-hand man to the Pope, played in this film by Franco Nero, in terms of exorcisms. And when he is faced with a possessed young child called Henry, played by the wonderfully named Peter de Souza Feoni, Peter de Souza Feoni, he's going to have to change that name if he wants to get recognized in this business. Henry is living with his family in an old Spanish monastery, and Amorth realizes this is like nothing he's seen before. And this time the devil has his sights set not just on the local family, but also on the very top of the Catholic Church. Here's a clip.
98% are recommended by him to doctors and psychiatrists.
The other 2%, I call it evil.
So, Scott, I don't think you've seen The Pope's Exorcist either yet.
No, this is another one I've not had a chance to get into see yet.
I mean, it was quite fun. Russell Crowe is certainly good value. He has great screen presence. I really loved his performance in the lockdown film Unhinged, playing a psychopathic road rage guy, and he has that same kind of presence on the screen that I think he does better than few people, right? But what surprised me with the film is it wasn't completely po-faced, and Russell Crowe's character actually comes out with lots of wisecracks about what he's doing, saying that the devil hates jokes is one of the things he comes out with, and he comes out with all these little witticisms and asides which I think actually raised the film up and actually made it a lot more fun than it could have been as a straight kind of exorcism film. The script is also quite clever in that it plays him as 98% a kind of social worker and psychologist. So his boss makes the point that 98% of the time, all the people he goes to see think they're possessed, but actually they're just mentally a little bit unwell. And by doing certain things, he can just get them out of it. But then film focuses on, well, what about the other 2%? And that is real. I don't believe in any of this stuff, by the way, but allegedly this is kind of real possession, and he is really employed to deal with that 2% of the job that turns out to be serious stuff. The kid, played by Peter D'Souza Fahony, there we are, I got it right first time there. This is actually his acting debut as the possessed child. He's actually a model, a kind of catalogue model, and also a black belt karate expert as well, which I read, which is quite interesting. But he's really excellent in this film. I have to say, the scenes with him in it, as the being possessed and using all the strange voices, clearly not his own voice, he was really good and effective. Difficult to know with this type of role how much is acting and how much is overlaid special effects and visual animation stuff going on in his face, but it was effective, I thought, in terms of what he did. Negatives for me is that there was really poor development of the family surrounding the child and the child himself. All of these characters are very, very two-dimensional. The widowed mother, the kind of oversexed teenage girl, rebel in the family, and this guy Henry, who it turns out is mute and has been mute for a year since his father died for reasons I won't go into. But that was about the level of it, and there was no depth to the characterization for me, which meant that when things started happening to them, you didn't really get sucked into caring particularly much about what was happening and why. Also, I think if horror fans went in to see this film, they'd be probably disappointed. There are lots of creepy moments and some moments that kind of creep me out a bit. There's one that you see in the trailer with the boy kind of vomiting up this little red bird, which was creepy given the backstory in the film around that. But the thing never really scared me per se, and it's only a 15, not an 18, so you wouldn't expect there to be extreme gore or extreme horror, but it never really got to me that thinking, God, I'm really creeped out and I'm not sure I want to sit here and stay and watch this type of film, which I have felt in some horror films, like The Night House with Rebecca Hall. I thought was a really effective, creepy movie. Again, only a 15.
Yeah, I love that film too.
But it really managed to creep me out watching it. So, and this I never felt that. So I gave it a 6 out of 10. It's worth seeing. It's worth seeing for Russell Crowe doing his stuff. It kind of set itself up at the end for 198 other sequels, which may happen or may not, depending on how successful this is. But I'll certainly go and watch Russell Crowe do that again in another film, perhaps with a slightly better script and a better story.
Would you say it's one that should be seen in the cinema, or might as well just wait till it's available on streaming?
I thought it was quite effective in the cinema. Yeah, there are some good set pieces in there, and it had a kind of cinematic quality. So I think it's worth a trip to the cinema if you can catch it. Moving on to another one, which I know you haven't seen, Scott, because this is actually out today when this podcast is released. I think it will probably only be on very limited distribution because it is Arabic language with subtitles, which is never going to draw a mass audience. Indeed, this came out as a Cineworld Unlimited screening a couple of days ago, and I was one of 8 people in the big screen that I was in watching this film. People seem to have a real aversion to subtitled films, and maybe it's literacy, right, but to some degree. But I don't know why people, other than that, have an aversion to sitting and watching those types of films, because they're really very good. In Cairo Conspiracy, which has had a trailer out for quite a few weeks now, Adam, played by Tawfiq Bahom, is a teenager living in a rural fishing community, helping his father with the daily catch. But he's also very clever, and he's been encouraged by his local imam to gain a scholarship to a legendary seat of learning in Cairo, an Islamic university called Al-Azhar. And when the leader of the university, and indeed the religious leader of Egypt, the Grand Imam, dies, Adam becomes a pawn in an increasingly dangerous game of politics. Here's a clip.
أنا اتكشفت أنت خليني أخلع شوف لي ملك جديد ويفضل يكون طالب جديد لسه بشوكه آدم هو نموذج للطالب المثالي عندك شرايب هنا في مصر لا محتاجينك تساعدنا احنا بنعتقد ان الاخوان اخترقوا الازهر.
So this one's directed by a Swedish-born guy called Tariq Salah, but obviously with strong links to Egypt and Islam in there. He's actually been barred from re-entering Egypt, so the film was actually filmed in Turkey. So he's not seen as a useful person for the Egyptian authorities. And when you watch the film, you can kind of understand he's leaning into that. Because this does not paint the Egypt state services in a good light at all. It's a very good looking film, and you kind of get that impression from the trailer. The cinematography is really wonderful, and there are some very striking scenes, some of which you can see if you watch the trailer, which really stick in the mind as being beautifully done indeed. And I really like this film. I found it really interesting insight into sort of the ways of Islamic teaching and what goes on at this Islamic university. At one point, there's a competition between the students that is effectively a Quran-off, where they are reciting lines from the Quran, and the first one to get it wrong gets knocked out, type of thing, which was, I thought, was really kind of fascinating as a scene in the film. But this is a really tense political thriller, and it's such a quiet film. It's not loud and flashy. There is a lot of talking, and the tension just builds up and builds up through the film until it gets to a conclusion, which I obviously will not spoil in this film. And it's very effective, I thought, in doing that. I saw one review that said, oh, it's not tense at all. Absolutely disagree. This is a film that you really don't quite know where it's going to go. To the extent that I went with the illustrious Mrs. Movie Man to this film and her friend, and both of them ended up completely traumatized by this film. They absolutely hated it, right? Because of the insidious nature of the tension that the film built up as it went along. And both of them said afterwards, God, I wish I'd known that you were hating it so much. We'd have got up and gone out and gone to watch something else. That's how much they really hated this film. Both of them together independently came out with that view. And this isn't a 18 certificate horror thing that they would never go to see. This is a 12 certificate film, but the tension it built up during the running time had that really interesting, very, very strong reaction to them. And I'd be really curious if other people go to see it and feel the same about it. So I thought it was good. I think this one is a must see, just to experience that and see if you feel the same way about it. I gave it an 8 out of 10, and yeah, it was good. Didn't get nominated for the best international film last year. It was the entry from Sweden. It didn't make the short list. There were a lot of good films in that list this year. I'm not sure whether or not it should have, but I wouldn't have been unhappy to see it in that short list.
It definitely sounds like a film worth watching. I'll keep an eye out. I was just looking at the phone at the Cineworld app, but it doesn't appear to be coming out, at least not this weekend. So I'll keep an eye out to see if it does drop at some point.
Yeah, you might have to look around for it. As I said, it's a Picture House release, so it'll be in Picture House cinemas. I don't know if you got a Picture House.
One of those.
Picture House. If you're watching this, Picture House, get one up in Aberdeen. Okay, right. Open a Picture House in Aberdeen right now, so Scott can see those films. Right. Okay. Next up is one I haven't seen, which is Kill Boksoon on Netflix. Scott, do you want to introduce this?
So Kill Boksoon is a Korean film that dropped on Netflix, I think about a week and a half to 2 weeks ago. It is an action-based movie about a woman who by day is a mother to her teenage daughter, but by night is a trained assassin.
문제를 해결하기 가장 쉬운 방법은 문제를 없애는 거잖아. 나 대표님한테 죽어요? 요이?
Okay, that sounds fun. I must confess, I started putting this film on to watch the other day, but I was ironing. I had a big pile of ironing of my shirts to do, and it has subtitles. You can't iron and subtitle it. It's just
that's a danger.
Not possible to do. So I stopped it, but I did like the first 2 or 3 minutes that I saw and thought, yeah, this is one that I will want to go back to.
Yeah, I think that opening was really impressive. It had the action skills and fight choreography that was really impressive that you get from a lot of these Asian movies. The music, I thought, was really well sort of integrated in the opening and throughout the film as a whole. In fact, there's a lot of different styles of music that they use throughout the film, so that really impressed me. And I don't know if you managed to get it from bits that you saw, but I found that there was some dark humor in there as well that I really appreciated. And it was very subtle, or maybe it wasn't meant to be. Maybe my mind just went there. But I thought there was some dark humor in there. So I've seen a lot of people compare this film to John Wick, as most of these action movies are compared to these days.
You've just gone and put me off it. Don't put me off
it. Well, the thing about this film is that it has tremendous action scenes, and the way they're filmed is very impressive. There's a lot of great camera work where it sort of spins around the room where things are happening, and you get to see a lot of, like, I complained about the quick cut editing for Operation Fortune. This one allows the stars to do the action in real time, and you get to actually watch that properly, which is always better in an action movie, I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the lead actress, whose name is Jeon Do-yeon, apologies if I butchered that, but I thought she was really impressive, both in terms of the action scenes that she has to be involved with, but also in the more mundane scenes where it's her and her daughter, and they're just talking about life issues, things that are going on in her daughter's life that are just completely normal things. But then we know that in the back of her mind, she has all this very tense, life-threatening things going on that she's flipping back and forth to from her day to her night life. And so I thought conceptually that was really impressive. In terms of execution, I actually think they could have made even more of that concept and just focus more on what that means to have such a different lifestyle of being the legendary skilled assassin that people look up to in that world, and then just being a mum, going out, getting the groceries, coming home, cleaning up after your daughter that's leaving stuff around.
Yeah.
And yeah, that I thought it was interesting from that point of view. But as the film went on, even though the action was really good, I did find myself not quite caring quite as much about the story as I wanted to. And I know a lot of other people disagree with that, but I think because it opened so strongly, I just found myself thinking this is a little bit like John Wick light. We've got this organization that is sort of controlling things in that seedy part of the world. And you've got this woman who essentially wants to get out of that world. So we've kind of seen
So it's
similar
very
things
similar.
to that. Yeah. And maybe that's a little bit of what held me back at times with this from fully embracing it and enjoying it for everything it was, because it did feel a little bit like, I've sort of seen this and very recently as well. But if you're a fan of sort of these Korean Asian movies that have a lot of action scenes and actual action stars doing actual action, then I think this is one that you can enjoy.
Okay, I still think I'll give it a look. I thought it looked quite stylish. Yeah, so that's good. Okay, so that's what score did you give that one out of 10?
So I gave that one a 6.
6. Okay, all right. So next up in our list, we have a long list this week, is God's Creatures, and this is a drama set in an Irish fishing village, and Brian O'Hara, played by Paul Mescal, who is Name of the Month after his Oscar nomination, obviously, returns to that village home after many years of being in Australia, and he's welcomed there by open arms by his mother, Eileen, played by Emily Watson, and she thinks that he can do no wrong in her eyes. The sun shines out of his arse, right? But then when an accusation is made in the village, the continuity of the whole village and village life starts to fall apart. Here's a clip where Brian returns for the first time and meets his mother.
Mom?
He's different, isn't he? Horn into himself. Do you reckon? Mother knows.
So, pretty much like Cairo Conspiracy that we just talked about, there's a nice brooding sense of blackness and despair that builds up through this film, because you can kind of see where things are kind of running with it as it goes along. Emily Watson and Paul Mescal, wonderful actors, and both really deliver in this film. I think Paul Mescal is one of the most natural actors in that he just is. He never looks like he's acting in his roles, and he's really good in this. I really liked it. And another name that was really great in this film was a lady called Aislinn Franciosi, and she plays a family friend called Sarah. And not only can she act, not only is she stunningly good looking, but she could also have a lovely singing voice as well, which she uses in the film. She reminded me constantly of a young Rachel Weisz, which is never bad in my book. She is definitely one to watch on my list. Negatives of the film. The film left me curiously unengaged for about the first 30 or 40 minutes. It never really clicked into the story fast enough for me, and I really didn't care what was happening on the screen. It does get better, but I think if you were watching this on Netflix or Amazon or another streaming service, you might get 20 or 30 minutes in and say, nah, this isn't for me, and turn it over to something else. Another problem I had was with the sound design for the film, which is very, very indistinct. The kind of sound balance between the dialogue and the background and the music didn't help, particularly given the strong accents that we used. And some of the characters, the accents were so broad, they were almost unimpenetrable. And that's, for me, having worked in Belfast for like 15 years for a Belfast company. So I'm kind of used to Irish dialects and accents, but I found some of the dialogue really difficult to understand. I got better as the film went on, as my ear got tuned, as sometimes happens in these films, but that was a negative for me. The film also has kind of art house pretensions as well. For example, it ends with a 5-minute continuous shot of somebody driving a car. What was the purpose of that? Was it a good use of the time? I didn't think so. So it was one of those films that you think, yeah, you're trying to put this in here just in order to evoke a kind of art house reaction to this film, which I didn't frankly have. So it was an interesting enough film to watch, but not one that I would kind of rush out to watch again by any sense of the word. I think I gave it a 6 out of 10. Might have been being a bit generous there. Might have been a 5 out of 10. So that's God's Creatures. Next up, we've got another one which I think is on Netflix, which is Chupa, which from the trailer looked to me very much like E.T. rebooted. Would you agree?
I would definitely agree with that, Bob.
Okay.
That's one of the main things about the film, I would say. Yeah, so Chupa is a film that is about a boy living in Kansas with his mum, who during spring break goes down to Mexico to spend that time with his grandfather and a couple of his cousins. And when he is down there, he happens to find a little furry friend in his grandfather's barn who he becomes a protector of.
Go, Booker!
You don't have to be alone anymore. Your family is still out there. We will find them. Wherever you are, I will always be by your side.
So that's Chupa. What is it? I mean, you can't really compete with E.T. as a film. Does this compete at all?
I mean, you can't really compete with E.T. In a straight up comparison, which a lot of this does feel like it. I was watching this film with my mum actually, and we were both saying together that it's a really nice, sweet family film. It does feel like if Spielberg was making one of his films nowadays about this subject, then it would look a lot like this.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the fact that you've got the kids with the mythical creature and they're making friends with it, they're also having to try and protect it from a villainous character who in this case is in the form of Christian Slater.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
Okay.
just I imagine a fun little cartoonish villain part for him to play. I'm sure he had a good time on it. And yeah, there's so much 90s nostalgia. The film's set in 1996. And so you see things like you've got a Jurassic Park poster on the wall. There's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle t-shirt that he's wearing. Oh, what else? He's got a Game Boy that he's playing as well. So for me, it brought back a lot of good memories of when I was a child in that time.
This was your air, was it, for nostalgia?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Totally,
I was the
all that
decade
stuff.
before. Yeah.
So yeah, I really enjoyed it from that point of view. And yeah, even though it is pretty much E.T. but set in Mexico, I still had a good time. If there's one thing that I would really criticize would be that at the start of the film, we get a bit of a prologue where we see the chupacabras. And for me, I think, although I understand why they did it, it's the kind of thing that I would have wished they waited a little bit longer within the film for us to see it instead of showing us straight away in like the opening scenes.
Right.
But that's a personal thing for.
So that's
me.
what Spielberg did so well with E.T., wasn't it? Was
yeah, you built up to it.
Built up to it, only showing hints, and then that scene where you first see it in the backyard and so on is just fabulous, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, marks out of 10.
So I give that one a 7. I think kids will really enjoy it a lot.
Yeah. What age kids? Is there anything scary in it, or? I
suppose towards the end, the sort of mother chupacabra could be considered quite scary. I'd probably say over 8s, maybe over 10s, perhaps something like that.
Okay. All right. Good. Next up, we've got Murder Mystery 2, which again is on Netflix. Murder Mystery was one of Netflix's most successful movies. I think that came out in 2018. And that introduced us to a married couple called Nick Spitz and Audrey Spitz, played by Adam Sandler and Jennifer Aniston, respectively. And they are kind of wannabe detectives, and they started their own detective agency, not very successful at being detectives, you have to say. And then they get invited to the wedding of their friend, the Maharaja, played by that great English actor Adil Akhtar. And on this private tropical island, they get a chance to put their skills to work as a murder and a kidnapping occur. Here's a clip where they first meet the professional investigator, Miller, played by Mark Strong.
The real detectives have arrived.
You must be the Spitzers.
Yes.
Your reputations precede you.
There you go.
Not in a positive way, I'm afraid.
Okay.
Okay.
So you were pulling faces there, Scott, while I introduced this one. I mean, as a comedy, you normally have to kind of tie me down to a chair and handcuff me to watch an Adam Sandler comedy. One of my wife's favorite films is 50 First Dates, and God help me, I must have seen that film dozens of times, and it really starts to grate. Adam Sandler's comedy generally grates on me, right? And as a comedy film, this one was really borderline, I thought, on the 6 laughs test. Some of them, though, were good ones. I like the fact that all the exotic animals on this island were wearing nappies to stop them keep the paradise poop free. And there was a good running joke about the fact that the bodyguard, Colonel Ulenga, played by John Carney, only has one good arm because he was shot in it in a previous attempt to protect the Maharaja. And so some of this stuff actually made me laugh. And this was a good ironing film. This was the ironing film I watched instead of watching Kill Boksoon. Yeah. And again, like John Wick, it had some good stunt work in Paris. There was a nice van kind of careering chase thing being done. That was good. And there was a finale set at the top of the Eiffel Tower, which I actually found surprisingly entertaining as a kind of set piece finale. It kind of worked for me. And there was a nice gory death, which, again, we won't spoil. My biggest negatives, Adam Sandler says his delivery just kind of great, sets my teeth on edge. And the writing of the whole thing as a kind of whodunit Glass Onion type thing made Glass Onion look like Shakespeare. It wasn't particularly well written, I didn't think. It didn't particularly work as a whodunit. It's interesting, it's called Murder Mystery 2, when actually what they're investigating is a kidnapping, right? the whole film is misnamed, and some of the writing seemed kind of out of color for modern sensibility. There's a character called character called Francisco, played by Enrique Arch, who is kind of this oversexed, sleep with thousands of women around the world type of thing, and that didn't seem at all in keeping with kind of 2023 sensibilities. There's one point at which he suggests putting a baby, quote unquote, in a 54-year-old Jennifer Aniston, which would be a good trick if you can pull it off. But given I think Aniston is childless, I was actually quite surprised that Jennifer Aniston would agree to that line being included in her dialogue. So there was some aspects that just didn't work in this film for me.
Yeah, so for me, this weekend, I actually watched both murder mystery films pretty much back to back. I was at my girlfriend's and she was recommending Murder Mystery because I hadn't seen the first one yet. And so we decided to watch that together. And after watching that, we just went on and watched the second one. I'll be honest, I didn't think either of them were particularly great. I'd say the first one is slightly better. There's maybe a few more laughs in there. I just say, though, there are moments in Murder Mystery 2, like the ones that you mentioned, that they are funny in the moment, but they are that brief, oh, that's funny, and then you move on. There's very little that lasts in terms of comedy there. And I think that's probably one of the biggest problems with this film, is that it's so inconsistent, where one scene you'll have a joke and be like, okay, that was funny. Then the next scene, it's like, didn't work in the slightest. And is far too inconsistent like that. It feels like the writers were just throwing everything out there, and maybe some of it will work, maybe some of it won't, but we're just going to leave it all in anyway. I actually do like the sort of chemistry that Aniston and Sandler have together. I feel like a lot of the script is maybe ad-libbed during this movie, and they're just playing on the moment and just trying to be naturally funny.
Yeah,
which
might be.
I think more so in Aniston's case really works. Sandler, I think like you. Sandler's an interesting one for me because if you go back to some of the 90s things like The Waterboy, I absolutely love, find that film hilarious. You've got the likes of Happy Gilmore, or to a lesser extent, Billy Madison, and I really enjoyed those as comedies. His more modern comedies, he just feels like he's coasting. He's just normally getting his friends together to just have a laugh. And if a film isn't very good, he doesn't really care, I don't think.
Yeah.
He is a good dramatic actor when he wants to be, though.
Uncut Gems, yeah.
Well, I actually hated that one. But,
oh, did you?
But I loved him in Hustle and also the Meyerowitz stories as well, 2 Netflix films.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoyed him in those, and I wish he would do more dramatic acting because he's better at it, to be honest. Yeah, for this one, too many of the characters were a bit annoying. As much as I love Adil Akhtar generally, that Maharaja character, it's so over the top and just like over the too much. Yeah. It's really too much.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm probably on a mid to low 5 on this one.
Yeah, I actually gave it a 6 because I thought it was watchable. The illustrious Mrs. Movie Man fell asleep during the middle of it, but still enjoyed it. So and she wasn't traumatized like Cairo Conspiracy. So I mean, anything like that, it's got to be good. Yeah. So our last film today is On a Wing and a Prayer. Do you want to introduce this one, Scott?
Yeah, so this is a film starring Dennis Quaid where he has to make a trip following a death in the family. And we see him in a plane with his family on his way home when something unfortunate happens to the pilot.
You'll never guess from the trailer what's going to happen.
No, really. I didn't even watch the trailer, to be honest.
The trailer leaves nothing to the imagination. Yeah.
I see. Okay, so yeah, something unfortunate happens to the pilot, and well, Dennis Quaid has to try and land the plane and get his family back on the ground safely while people in air traffic control are trying to guide him along with that.
Miami Center. Is anyone there?
Say your tail number and intention.
Doug, what's going on?
I've got an emergency up here. My wife and daughters are on this plane.
I need you to stop a plane crash. You're the only person I know who can save them.
Has you flown a King Air?
Never.
Looks like I picked the wrong week to stop sniffing glue.
Well, the thing about this film, Bob, is that I actually on paper thought this could be quite good. The fact that Dennis Quaid's in, I usually quite like him, but there's a tension in the storyline in general. The fact that he's up in the air, he's not a trained pilot, he's got his whole family on board. How are we going to fly this plane and get everyone back down safely? Even with help from air traffic control and various other people that get involved throughout the process. But the problem with this film is that it feels like it was a Lifetime movie. The writing is really poor. I thought the acting was pretty weak throughout. The music feels like very much that sort of like Hallmark Lifetime cheesy music that they just put over things without really feeling relevant to it. The CGI, I mean, wow. When you see scenes of the plane outside, when it just cuts to outside the plane and you see that green screen and you're like, this is so cheap. It's such a shame because I think it was made on a very low budget, to be honest. And I think if it had a little bit more money and it spent a little bit more time working on the script itself, that is the type of film that you can build through great tension. But when the acting and dialogue were as poor as it was, I just tuned out too early in the film, and I felt like I finished it, but I wasn't really concentrating on it after a while, because you just knew where it was going, and it really wasn't very good at all.
And it is based on a true story, I think, isn't it?
I believe it is, yeah.
Yeah, I think it said that on the trailer. Yeah, so yeah. Okay, and is that on Amazon or Netflix?
This is an Amazon Prime one.
Amazon Prime, but not one you would recommend. Marks out of 10?
I'll probably give it a 4.
4 out of 10. Okay, yeah. Okay, that's our last film of 10 films that we've been through. Yeah, we mustn't take a week off again because they build up, don't they? But again, some good mix of films in there to see at the cinema, some good films on streaming, some less good films on streaming. But hopefully that overview of the films was helpful to you, dear viewer. And we will be back with you next week. There's some interesting films out this Friday, including Renfield, which I'm looking forward to a lot, with Nicholas Hoult and Nicolas Cage, which I think looks a hoot. So with that, thank you, Scott. I will see you again next week.
Thanks very much, Bob. I'll speak to you next week.
Thanks for listening to Flickering Dreams. Please subscribe to the podcast to get the latest edition delivered directly to your ears.